Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ballet Beyond Podcast, where we interview current and former professionals, teachers, patrons, and more from the world of ballet and dance. You'll get insight from top dancers and instructors in the industry, as well as local performers and educators as they talk about their experiences in the business. I'm your host today, Pete Commander. If you're from the greater Baltimore area, don't forget to check out CHARM City Ballet, located in Cockeysville, where we offer classes for all dancers ages 3 through adult. Visit www.charmcityballet.com for information on classes, auditions, and upcoming performances. This is our 4th episode of Ballet and Beyond, and we're excited for today's guest, Brian Carey Chung. Brian has been a company member with Lines Ballet, Complexions Contemporary Ballet, Ballet Hispanico of New York, and Armitage Gone Dance, where he was a principal dancer, rehearsal director, and assistant choreographer to Carol Armitage. He has taught on the faculties of Lines Ballet at San Francisco Dance Center, Perry Dance Capizio Center, Broadway Dance Center, and Joffrey Ballet School. He was also an assistant professor of ballet at Northern Illinois University and has guest lectured and taught master classes internationally at NYU Tisch, Stanford University, University of Hawaii, and University of Arizona. All right, Brian, thanks so much for being with us today and being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a great project.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so obviously we're going to talk about contemporary ballet because that's your background. But I want to start with this. Since the increased popularity of contemporary ballet in the last 15 or 20 years, how do you think it has influenced ballet as a culture and as an art form?
I think contemporary ballet is the inevitable progression of classical ballet as all art forms evolve. So, if you think about painting, for example, you have the classical painters that dealt with light, and then in the contemporary, you have contemporary artists who are not necessarily dealing with light in the representational method of things, and they're also bringing in other concepts into their practice. And so with contemporary ballet, you have an exploration of ideas that are not necessarily rooted in classicism. They're rooted in where we are now and the science that we know now, and the way that the body moves in a contemporary place with materials that we have on our bodies that allow us to move in a certain way. Whereas when ballet first started, the materials were very different and they were stiffer and the torso couldn't move. So, all of this is taking place at the same time, and we're responding to that with movement. And so contemporary ballet really is an evolutionary process with classical ballet.
What ways do you think contemporary ballet has then influenced classical ballet? How has classical ballet changed since the evolution?
So classical ballet is still the same. I mean, you still take ballet class, and it's depending on the teacher. The method is still the same. You have a bar. You start with pliés and tendus. It's codified in a certain way. The movement, though, the vocabulary, the Linda progression is the same through the ballet class usually, but the actual movements that you do depend on the teacher's mood. It depends on what the teacher has to teach to the class, depending on the students in front of the teacher, and also how it's put together it can be different. So I would say that contemporary ballet is extremely influenced by classical ballet, and I think in return, classical ballet is changing. So if you look at a company like the Royal Ballet, for example, what you see is repertoire from the classics are being done, but then you also have they have 2 resident choreographers there, and they're both wonderful choreographers, I think, and they're really trying to push the envelope with regard to how movement is being seen as a classical reference. So, for example, it would not be unusual for one of the choreographers to have the dancer completely upside down, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm.
Um, Whereas, in a fish, the dancer is sort of upside down, but not really. It's
Right.
still. But now you see the dancers on the floor, upside down, twisting, really extreme movements of the body. So not just an extreme movement because of the natural anatomy of the body, but an extreme movement because the body is now capable because of training, and also, like I said, the costumes, the materials that we can use, so it allows more movement.
Mm.
Um, the dancers are having a lot more twisting, and the use of the spine is much more elaborate. So for sure it's being influenced. Both are they're feeding off of each other. Um, I think it's important though to understand that a classical ballet cannot really be created again in now.
Mm.
Why would we want to do that as artists? Why would a choreographer want to create a classical ballet? It's already been done. So, so you see, for example, I went to New York City. No, sorry, I went to American Ballet Theater about a month ago, and I saw Jane Eyre.
Uh-huh.
I think is it Eyre or Eyre? I'm not sure, but anyway, Jane Eyre. And the choreography was definitely contemporary ballet,
Mm.
because why would you want to construct a story ballet with only using vocabulary that is classical?
Right.
Um, it just doesn't make any sense for a contemporary artist to do that. It would be probably seen as archaic.
Mm.
Um, you know, that doesn't mean that we can't use classical material as an analogy for something, and in fact, in my ballets, uh, all of the vocabulary is there. You're gonna see an arabesque, you're gonna see a piqué, you're gonna see, uh, pirouettes. But I might ask the dancer to do this arabesque in coming from a move that is a move, coming from a step that is you wouldn't necessarily think of doing the arabesque from. And that
Mm.
makes it contemporary, if that makes any sense.
Right.
How can we make that classical step interesting now for the audience we have now, for the music that we have now? I mean, just even thinking about the music that we have at our disposal, it's much a larger many genres of music we can pull into classical material that
Mm.
you know so I don't really I think it's possible to create a classical ballet now, but I don't know what newness that would show, because the great masters have done it so well. Like, why would we do another Swan Lake that is exactly the same classical Swan Lake that we already have?
Mm.
That's why you have, I forget the choreographer that did Swan Lake on the men.
Uh-huh.
um, I mean, that was a reinvention of Swan Lake. And yes, that makes sense because he's a contemporary artist and he wants to do something new with the story. And so if there's an obstacle to classical ballet, that I see that we need to make a shift in consciousness about, is the fact that we're still tied to the correctness and the rightness of classical ballet.
Mm.
Um, and the beauty of classical ballet, that we're a little closed off to seeing things as beautiful that aren't necessarily conventionally considered beautiful. And so because of that, we're a little bit stuck compared to the other art forms like music and painting. They are taking a lot more risk
Right.
with their forms because they're not stuck on this I guess conventional way of seeing beauty.
Mm.
You know, like
Mm.
in class, we're told, don't sickle your feet, stick your ribs in, all of these things. Well, the truth is that the body can sickle, and the ribs can go out. Um, and there is something to say that if we can use that language, and I'm not saying that there isn't something to say about not sickling the feet. It certainly looks prettier. But what if what you're trying to say isn't about looking pretty? What if you're really trying to show an emotion that is really affected by things other than this surface level beauty? You have to be able to do it. You have to be able to say it. And so I think, choreographers like Forsyth and Batsheva, Ohad Naharin, I mean, they're tickling their feet, they're sticking their ribs out, they're sticking their butt out, their grand pliés are like, one leg is sort of turned out and the other one is, it's much more, you have a wider range of emotional palette. The palette is larger. You have, whereas we used to have, maybe they were crushing pigments, in the past, and they could only get green, orange, purple, red. Now we can get many, many shades of those, right? And so that is what our bodies are able to do. We can show all of that now, and we should, because I think that communicates more accurately, and we're not pretending so much as communicating something deeply. That's what the goal ought to be, to communicate deeply, like when you read a book, like when you read something on your own and it resonates deeply. That is what ballet should be doing, because why not? Exactly,
Right.
So gone are the days where you just do tendu, a fourth, a la seconde, a la seconde, a la seconde, a la seconde, a la seconde. Yes, that's impressive, but then so what? What we need to do now is, what can we do with that a la seconde that tells something, that says something,
Right.
In the past, it was okay to have these classical moments where there would be like an interruption of the story, and all of a sudden the dancer would do something quite profoundly virtuosic. And there's nothing, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it's certainly impressive, and it makes the heart soar to watch that. But is that enough? Is that all we can do?
Right.
I suggest that it's not enough. It's not all we can do. And so that, this bridge into the contemporary ballet world really is not a bridge at all. It's really actually what I think is a natural progression of ballet. Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. So while I'm going to switch gears a little bit. While Becca and I were still at Goucher, Lines came to do a residency. And while I was unable to participate, Becca still talks about how Alonzo's class was unlike any she's ever taken. Tell us a little bit about your experience in working with Lines, and specifically Alonzo King.
Okay. Well, first of all, may I ask you a question? When was that? What year? Because I actually was at Goucher with Alonzo.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
It was 2007, 2008.
Oh, no. Yeah. So we had gone to Goucher before.
Oh, okay.
In the 90s. So that must have been a return. Yeah. So, Alonzo, well, I will say that his class, he's a great ballet master in that sense. I mean, he really understands technique. He's trained at City Ballet, I think. So,
okay.
Yeah. It could have been ABT, but one of those two. He went to school there. So, his education was solid, right? But what Alonzo does, and I think I'm deeply influenced by Alonzo, I'm trying now not to be so influenced in the material that I create as a choreographer, but I'm still philosophically deeply indebted to Alonzo, because he's brilliant. He really is able to tap into the dancers, what the dancer needs to do in order to bring out the best in the dancer. And so individually too, not just as a group. So he's really able to look at you and really find your weakness. And that can be really traumatic that's a traumatic experience for
Right.
anyone,
Right.
and but at the same time, if you are able to be strong enough and smart enough to tap into what he's saying to you, you will develop really rapidly. And you know, I really feel like I owe the career that I have had, as a dancer to Alonzo, because he really I started dancing very late. I was 19, I believe.
Okay.
And so, my first tandu at 19 maybe 18, it was, that's starting very late, and it's doable. It's doable, but many avenues of ballet were closed to me at that point, I think,
Mm.
because I started so late.
Right.
But had I started at 14, it would have maybe been a different story. But he really helped me. When I started joining the company, I still had so much to learn. I mean, it was only 4 years after that. I was 22, I think, when I joined this company.
Okay.
So, I was still a pretty naive dancer. I mean, he saw whatever he saw in me, but as far as technically, there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot that I needed to learn, and she really helped me with that.
Mm.
So, but he's just really able to tap into the essence of the thing, and he's able to communicate that beautifully.
Mm. So he's quoted as saying, I was drawn to Brian's unique way of seeing into movement and his ability to reference and embody symbol and idea. What does he mean, and what are some of the thought processes that you went through while you were performing regularly?
So, um, you know, he and also Carol Armitage, actually, interestingly, are completely different choreographers, and but Carol would say you're a poet, when I was younger, I didn't really quite understand what she meant. But I mean, I'm also a writer, so I understand what it means to be a poet. But it was interesting that she would use those words. But
Right.
what Alonso is saying, symbol and idea and imagery and all of that, that's the realm of poetry, really. And so I think what he means is that when a shape is created by a dancer, and this is something I try to teach when I teach a ballet class, because it's not enough just to execute the step beautifully and well. It is not enough. You need to infuse that step with you, with your whatever brings you to the table at that moment, or whatever is needed for the table at that moment. You need to come to it. It's not enough. Otherwise, you're just an object, and we're living objects. We're living,
Right.
dancing, right? We're not just a chair. We're a living chair. And so, how do we do that? And Alonso, I think he means with symbol, and I forget what you said, but I think he really means that I was able to tap into whatever he was saying or doing. If he gave me a shape or he gave us a shape, I was able to imbue that shape a, with a message. And so
Mm.
in that way, not that we need to think so much about the audience, but you know, we are not communicating into a vacuum. The point is to communicate, right?
Right.
And so, you know, if he can find dancers that can deliver that message quickly, and efficiently, um, and sincerely and truthfully, those are both the same. Truthfully, basically, sincerely. Let's just put it that way,
Right.
and um, and clearly, then he would have done his job. It makes his job easier, right? And so I think that's really what he's saying, is this idea of metaphor making. So if I have a fist pushing out from if I create a fist pushing out in space, you know, am I just pushing my arm out with my fist closed, or am I going to actually show that is the message that I'm doing? What am I doing? Who am I? Why is my fist in the air? Is it pointed to someone? what is it meant to do that? What if I have the fist and then I turn the hand over and open it up and it becomes a palm reaching out to that person?
Mm,
Now it becomes something else, right? And
right.
and so this kind of image making with the body is that kind of investigation is something that not all of us are capable, or it comes easy for, but it is the job of every dancer to get there. that
Mm,
is that is what makes you um that is what makes you an artist, you know. An arabesque is an arabesque, but no, it's not just an arabesque. you know.
right, 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 right.
So yeah.
Mm. All right. On a little bit different note, I want to talk about since you retired from ballet, you had gone into nursing, correct?
hmm yes, I'm
Um,
still a
and
nurse.
and how long have you been a nurse?
I've been a nurse for a year and 9 months.
Excellent. Um, so what kind of strategies do you use to help balance your work life in nursing and your artistic drive?
Well, I don't know if I have a strategy.
Okay.
I think that I'm I think that I'm a person that is curious, and yeah, I think my curiosity drives me to do things. And so I I am I'm drawn to I'm constantly doing things because of my curiosity, I think.
Hmm.
It turns out that at a certain age we have to retire from dance, so we cannot be dancers forever. At
Right.
least my body would not allow me to be a dancer forever. I know that
Right.
some dancers are successful dancing, into their 60s, 50s, 60s. I That was not possible for my body. So, I had to make some choices about what I wanted to do, and I really wanted to do something meaningful. I think, dance is one of those things that it's a little bit self-absorbed. If
Mm-hmm.
you have to, your body is your instrument, and so you have to, there's no escaping the self-absorption, right?
Mm,
There's no
right.
way to escape it. So I'm retiring from dance. I thought, at first I thought maybe I'll just be a teacher, not just be a teacher, but a teacher. And then I realized that I wanted to say more, I wanted to do more. um, Started choreographing, but becoming a choreographer, an independent choreographer, I was pretty hungry a lot.
Right. Right. Right.
so so I had to make a decision about, things. And I I I want to retire and not be in the poorhouse, stuff like that.
Right.
So I decided medicine was always interesting to me. I thought maybe I'd become a doctor, but then I realized that I wanted to still pursue my other interests in art. And so nursing makes sense because nursing is very clearly defined. We work, a certain amount of hours per week, a certain amount of shifts per week. And then after that, you're free to do whatever you want to do. And so, it was the best of both worlds,
Mm.
in that sense.
What kind of overlap do you find with your work as a dancer or a choreographer and your work in nursing, specifically in working with people?
Well, both are team driven. So, you're a dancer, as much as they are individual, soloists, whatever. They're still a part of a team. When they dance together, the core, that
Mm.
core permeates everything. And so, with that's a similar. It's also extremely physically physical, um, job. So, you know, it's not like a physical therapist physical, but it's physical. You're running
Right.
around. You're on your feet. You're you know putting out fires basically. Um,
Right. Right.
so with dance, also being in the moment. There's no room for a lot of error in nursing. I mean, errors are happening because we're human beings, but we're hopefully getting rid of, through protocols, the life or death kind of errors, right? In the end, though, a lot of it has to do with the patient's ability as well, and patient's health. But with dance, you're on the stage, and it's sort of like now or never kind of way of thinking about things.
Mm.
Although the mistakes we make on stage aren't hurting anyone, or you're not going to die from that, but there's that feeling of eminent need, eminent now, that moment, and that's similar in nursing. What else? I don't know. I think nurses in general, I mean, that we're all different personalities, right? But I think there's a desire to help and desire to to communicate that in some way. And so, in that sense, the dancer has that. But dancers are a lot more self-absorbed than that their career, just the trajectory has to be that way.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, it is kind of a stretch, but I think if you look at it, a lot of dancers, when they retire, they become doctors. If they're young enough, they become doctors, or they go on to other things. I have other friends that are in the health profession.
Mm.
So, yeah.
All right. So earlier you had actually mentioned writing, and I know that you have an MFA in creative writing, correct?
Yes, I do.
And that at one time you taught poetry as an adjunct professor at NYU. So
Yeah,
is writing something you still do regularly?
yeah. Well, it's not something I do regularly. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't pay the bills. I
Right.
would like to be able to do it regularly, but I can't. I don't have the time. But I just came back from a poetry retreat. I belong to SQUA. The SQUA, it's actually the community of writers, and it happens in Squaw Valley every year. And it's a group of writers that, it's a very you have to send work in to get into this program, this workshop. But then once you're in, you can return after 2 years or something. So it's a very well known writers group. The poet laureate Robert Haas was there this year as a
Mm.
participant. There were 5 Pulitzer Prize winners. It's a very but it's a place where it's generative. We're there to write new material, and in a safe environment where we can have a dialogue with each other, and we can read our poems to each other and have constructive, positive feedback, because it's so new that negative feedback isn't necessarily the right moment for that.
Right.
So I did that a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it was lovely. So I try to write. I still haven't written a first book. I mean, I went to school at NYU there were 17 of us, I think, in the program at the time, and I think like 11 of us have books already. Two
Okay.
two of us are National Book Award winners, and I still don't have a book. So it's a little bit frustrating for me in some sense, because if I had the time, or if I were independently wealthy, I could spend more time doing that. But I don't. I work 12-and-a-half-hour shifts, and I commute to work an hour each way. And
Mm.
so that's a 16-hour day with, food and driving and working. And that doesn't leave very much time for writing.
Right.
Um, but then on my days off, I sometimes write. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Right.
I'm not a consistent writer.
So, how has writing influenced your work as a dancer or a choreographer? And do you find that there's a pretty strong connection between them?
Well, that is an excellent question, and I think that they are absolutely intertwined. Because again, what is the point of doing anything, any artistic pursuit? It is to communicate. Even if you're Emily Dickinson and you have no one to communicate to, because you're a woman and it's hard to get your work published, you're still writing to, even if it's to the silent room, you're still writing to something. And so with dance, it's the same. We're making letters. We're making our vocabulary is. I even in talking about this today, I've used poetic terminology. I've used symbol, I've used idea, I've used metaphor. Now we're talking about letters, and the shapes that we make with our bodies are actually could be considered words. We create sentences.
Mm.
We call them phrases in dance, but they are technically sentences. They're you can create a noun feeling with your body. You can create a verb feeling with your body. And when you make the decision and you edit a line, a sentence in poetry, similarly, you can make a decision and edit this a phrase, a sentence, and it's a constructed movement sequence. And we should, as choreographers, I think a lot of choreographers don't, because they don't have a strong literary background, maybe. But I think it's very important to treat the phrase rigorously, like a poet would. And so I think it's very, very important for me. I'm so glad that I have that background, because it really helps me. It similarly with music too. I used to play the piano, and that knowledge of music really is helpful to choreograph.
So I'm gonna switch to asking for a little advice for people who are trying to get into dance. How would you go about navigating the world of contemporary ballet?
So I would focus on, if you want to be a contemporary ballet dancer, I would focus on classical ballet.
Interesting.
because you need a classical ballet background. Now, it doesn't mean that you are going to end up there, but you need to take I'm sounding so adamant right now, but it would behoove one, let's just put it that way, to take ballet class, because a contemporary ballet dancer is not going to be able to do much without it. First of all, contemporary ballet dancers, they dance on point as well. And so even with that, the point shoe, there's no way to get on point unless you take a ballet class, really. I mean, I can't imagine doing hip hop and then just going on point, because you use the way the class is constructed. It's formalized in a way to help you achieve that. And so I would say don't even think about navigating. I would say do it. Just do it. And try to think less of yourself and less of why you're there, and more of why you're there. I'm sorry. And how you can achieve, greater technique and greater heart, and greater generosity, greater sense of spirit in everything that you're doing, because that's what it takes. Actually, it's not even about contemporary ballet. It's just to become a concert artist at any at a level where you're in one of these companies. I think you have to somehow be able to communicate not just your brilliant body and the facility that you might have, but you need to be able to communicate who you are fundamentally, and that who you are better be interesting, because because if you're not interesting to yourself, then you cannot be interesting to others. And why no one is going to really be that interested in looking at you if you're not interesting to look at. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, if anything, it's cultivating who you are as a person. It's cultivating what you bring to the table above all others, or in addition to all others. And then also making sure that your facility is, in peak condition, which, with dance, and that's a struggle. Once you get into a company, your body kind of gets into peak condition because you're rehearsing all the time. You're taking class with the company, you're in a set, you're dancing. But when you're struggling to become a professional dancer, it's more difficult because you're taking class maybe 1 to 1.5 hours a day, and then you might go to an audition or something. But what I would advise is to not do that. I would take class in the morning, do your audition, take yoga, take gyrotonic, or Pilates. Gyrotonic is better for contemporary ballet, I think.
Mm.
But I would make sure that I am dancing a good 8 hours that day, because that is how you're going to get into a company.
Mm.
Your body has to be a machine, and at the same time, it has to be the most human it can be. That contradiction is really important.
Mm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Talk to us a little bit about so Collective Body Dance Lab. That's a project that you had started.
Yeah. So I formed it. I was in New York, and I was working with Carol. I was a rehearsal director at the time. Rehearsal directing. You we both quickly realized that really I'm a choreographer.
Okay.
And so I became a choreographer. And what did I decide to do? I decided to start a company, but I wanted to have a company where my work wasn't the only work. Like, I thought it would be interesting to create a group of choreographers that work together. And I contacted Benny Royce Rayon, and I also contacted Tao Tang Dao.
Okay.
And it just didn't work out. For some reason. Choreographers in general, they're both lovely people, but in general, we're very it's very difficult to share, it seems like. But my heart was in the right place. I was willing to share, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. We didn't even have a show. We just had a meeting, and then it dissipated from that meeting. So I still continued with it, though. I said, okay, well, I'm still going to pull people. I'm going to ask composers to work with the dancers, and I would get the dancers through auditions or through word of mouth. And so I started this Collective Body Dance Lab. And it went on for 4 years, and then I got a professorship, an assistant professorship, and was traveling a lot. So I couldn't really keep up with that and the company really on the salary I was making. Quite frankly, I just really couldn't do both. And so I made it a project-based company. And truthfully, it's still a project-based company, but right now I'm the resident choreographer for a ballet company in Florida. And
Okay.
so I'm the resident choreographer for Dance Alive National Ballet. I'm the new resident choreographer there, I should say. This is my first.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that is keeping me very busy. It's great because I'm not the director, I'm the choreographer, and I'm one of the choreographers. There's two of us, and my responsibility is to choreograph, and so I can't really beat that. I mean, because with Collective Body Dance Lab, I'm having to schlep costumes, find rehearsal space, find theaters,
Right.
find money. All of that is, and choreograph. And so now I just have to choreograph, which quite frankly is a relief.
Right.
It's a relief.
Right.
But I one day want to come. It's still near and dear to my heart, but I need help. I can't do it on my own, and I don't want to. I have too much. I have to think about my own survival here, and putting food on my table and having money to retire on.
Right.
I mean, that is, at my age, it's really important to be able to think about these things. Otherwise, it's quite naive not to.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all I had for us today. And thank you, Brian, so much for doing this for us.
Not a problem. My pleasure. And I hope, it gets to inspire some dancers that are, maybe a little bit nervous about starting on in the world of dance, because it's so peripheral to our mainstream culture, and it is not the most easy life in the sense of making a living for some of us. Some people are quite blessed, if you the New York City Ballets of the world and the ABTs of the world.
Right.
But for many others, it's not that easy. But I hope it encourages someone to look at themselves and think, what is it that in my time on the planet do I want to achieve? What is it that I would like to leave behind as a and if you can't even get if they can't even get there, what is it that I want to really ultimately say? What if when I look back, what is it? Who is the person that I wanted to see and be proud of? What is my child self that I would be proud of? And so, hopefully that will lead to a fearlessness, because you cannot be afraid and be a dancer. It really is they just don't coexist very well, fear and you have to be able to conquer your fear to be a dancer. And so hopefully it inspires that, because we do need dance. We do need young people that are interested in it and that love it. There's a 13-year-old boy at Dance Alive. He is spectacular, and I really just admire this young man. There are many beautiful young dancers there. Of course, there really are at least 8 or 9 that I think are could be professional dancers. But he's just the spirit of dance. When you see this young man move, and you listen to him, and the way he just absorbs, it's like a sponge. He just absorbs material. He is inspiring. He inspires me. He inspires me as a choreographer. And that's the kind of dancer, that's the kind of training we need to be training our dancers. How to inspire the choreographer. What is it? He doesn't even have to try, because he is it. He loves it so much that he's not trying to inspire me. He's just inspiring. And that is that's what we need. That's what we need.
Thanks so much again to Brian for being on the show and sharing his experience with us. This episode was brought to you by CHARM City Ballet. If you live in the greater Baltimore area, don't forget to check out CHARM City Ballet, located in Cockeysville. Visit www.charmcityballet.com for information on classes, auditions, and upcoming performances. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving Ballet and Beyond a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For questions and guest requests, please email us at balletandbeyondpodcast@gmail.com. I'm your host, Pete Commander. Thanks for listening.